But the big one for PE today, and some of these are within the module and module 2, what can you change to include students with disabilities? So the tree principle there, modifying your teaching strategies, rules and games, environment surfaces, and the equipment used. These are all the things that can be modified according to the needs within and inclusive strategies within your group. So some of the strategies to include students with disabilities, we'll start off with vision. And this is more specifically within PE. So this is quite related to ECU 101. Things such as brightly coloured balls are really important for the visually impaired, precise and clear explanations, recording instructions prior to the lesson, having a loud whistle. And another one of use could be a trained helper during your activities. The second one there is for hearing impaired. Some of the strategies that you could use are task card techniques, and I was going to set some of those up for our tabloid just last week on Friday, and that could be good just to be able to visually get your head around some of the activities, keep students nearby during instructions and activities, using an injured student to write notes, video demonstrations prior to the lesson, and that can, similar to task cards, getting your head around the activities prior to being delivered. Blinking lights for movement patterns, and that could be sort of any sort of pattern. It could be step up type things or jumping at a certain time. Okay. Number 3 there, you've got the physical impairments, and we'll look at a few more of these as we go through. Things such as lowering or enlarging the goal. You could be modifying the tempo of the game, reducing the weight and size of projectiles, that can how you see fit, slowing the ball down, playing games in different positions. So you can come up with your own strategies for these. These are just some strategies. And the last one there, number 4, learning. So what happens if you've got students that might have special learning needs? So keep instructions to a minimum and don't want to overload the students within your class. Teaching area should be a small distance to be able to manage the learning, and that allows them to feel in control of their learning if they're within a limited smaller area, and perhaps getting the parents also involved in some of the activities. So there's a really good checklist for you if you do have any of these special needs within your classroom, to ensure that all students, no matter what their abilities or their needs are, that you can accommodate for them. And going further into those physical impairments, if you do have some students with some coordination special needs, some of the extra considerations could be if you're doing striking sports, which is quite common in physical education, you could begin with a stationary object rather than rolling or throwing a ball after a baseball or cricket type game. You could have a stationary object, whether it's a cone to hit the ball off or one of those T-ball stands, so that's a good idea. Increasing the size of the ball and target, so that makes it a little bit easier for catching and those type of things, and be able to make the targets. Extra protection, could be extra protective equipment, less concern about accuracy with catching, so have a soft, light, slow moving. So an idea could be something like a balloon. It could be, or even less, one of those big blow-up balls that they're a little bit slower moving, and then having a backstopper in some of the striking activities as well. Balance and agility considerations, things such as increasing the body parts in contact with the floor, increasing the width, rails and beams, increasing the base of support, lowering center of gravity, the friction on the surface. So these are the things that can be modified for balance and agility considerations. Religious considerations would include, for example, if we're had some Muslim students within your class, allowing students to wear tracksuits and long sleeve tops and leggings, encouraging students to wear the latest hijabs. The wearing of headscarves should be permitted. With the swimming, allowing flexibility of wearing outfits that cover the body, swimming caps, and reassure students if they swallow water during the Ramadan period, communicating regularly, and with the dance considerations, perhaps consulting with parents and increasing understanding of the aims, diversity, and benefits of dance and physical education prior to some of the dance activities are some considerations. And getting into gender, so our ideas could be distributing leadership roles evenly rather than constantly providing it to a certain group, depending on if you're a male teacher, constantly giving leadership roles to males, and that goes for females, giving it to females, so that's an easy one there. Not assigning stereotypical responsibilities to both genders. Avoid labelling such as sissy or tomboy, avoiding sexist language, and watching your tone of voice so that it doesn't vary between the genders. For example, don't have a demanding voice for males and a quiet voice for females. So these are just some simple considerations within your class. And I think we went over this a little bit with your lesson planning, but to really ensure that that you consider students' learning backgrounds, you can determine their readiness, so their entry point relative to a particular understanding or skill. Their interest refers to a student's affinity, curiosity or passion, and the learning profile. And there's a range of ways you can determine the student's preference for learning styles. You could have a simple quiz, how do they best learn, and look at some of the strategies there. There's also some online ways for students to determine how they best learn, whether it be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And once again, the zone of proximal development, so making sure that that the work is according to their abilities, so not too hard, that will create anxiety, and not too easy. So that's where the curriculum comes in, and you can adjust according to that. And to ensure all of this can be achieved, pre-assessing students is really important, and that's really important not only for to address each of those, but for all those inclusive strategies. By pre-assessing, you can understand what are the students' special needs to be engaged within your classroom. So that's really important, and there's a range of strategies for that, which you can consider surveys and those type of things prior to, or even just some questioning, background information, and really trying to, so here's another thing to consider, is the multiple intelligences within your classroom. So within phys ed, you could think about including each of these aspects within your planning. So for instance, plenty of verbal instructions. There could be sequential activities. So that could be one way to address the mathematical side of things. The invasion games for spatial, lots of hands-on activities, the musical and rhythmic, and that could be not just your dance type movements, but also you could have quite sequential according to a certain lights or rhythm. The grouping activities, once again, and having a chance to interact and use teamwork. Having intrapersonal, so that's at the individual level, so having a chance to experiment on their own with certain skills, just like we did in week 2, where some of the internal students were able to just do some catching and bouncing and stuff on their own before getting into partners. And then even, and then naturalist, and that could be as simple as just getting out on the oval and those type of, and getting out in the natural surrounds. So there's some considerations for when you are planning to address each of these levels of intelligence. And here's a checklist. So this is something that once you've designed a unit of work or whatever it may be, you can just go through and just make sure that you address each of these areas to ensure that your classroom is inclusive. And you can just see some of the things that we've covered here. So sexist, racist, humour is avoided, and you go through. Inclusive language is used to ensure stereotyping isn't present. So there's something, not the best quality, that scan, but very useful as a checklist to make sure that your classrooms are inclusive. So refer to that one. And here's a YouTube clip that you can go to watch a really successful inclusive clip. Okay, so really well done so far, and the team will be aiming to provide further support for assignment 1 over the next couple of weeks with your unit plan and lesson planning, and continue to post on the discussion board, and we'll see you for some outdoor education considerations for next week.